Hi, you asked me to think back 55 years to my teenage years of what my thoughts and aspirations were for the world, looking 10 years ahead at the time. Well, just to give you a sort of a history lesson, at that time, the space race had started. America and Russia were both sending rockets towards the moon. We had the Cold War between Russia and America in its height. There was still the Vietnam War going on. And the Russians have actually put missiles in Cuba pointing at America. So there were some dramatic things happening in the world. Of course, there were no such things as mobile phones, as commercial use of computers. It's more scientific. And so life was much slower. We really picked up our news from the newspapers. So what did I think about for 10 years? I must admit, leaving school when I did, I had a chance to go into the financial businesses in London. But when I got there, I found out quickly I had to learn and learn and learn. I needed more education, I needed more awards to be able to further my career. And also I saw, in a sense, what there was around in terms of people's knowledge. So I had a hunger for knowledge, but also I had a hunger for social conscience. I very quickly became the editor of an internal magazine for Sports and Social Club, and I spent my time trying to get people to enjoy life outside of 9 to 5 as well as inside it. And therefore for me, I was thinking, first of all, please not there be another world war, because that would be a disaster. I was impressed about the race to the moon and how that would finish up. But really it was all about, what do I do in the next few years? More education, settle down to work, and then do the usual things, get my first car and hopefully be able to afford to buy an apartment. And that's where I was looking for, very, very narrow-minded. So here I am, age 73, been retired for over 10 years. And when I'm looking forward, I can also look back. I can look back because I've had the privilege of an amazing life. My business life has been such that I've been to many parts of the world. I've lived with many cultures. I've shared the ups and downs with friends from so many countries. And so I feel I do have an international experience. At the same time, my family have grown up around, I'm so proud of them, and they are also making use of their worldly knowledge to develop their own lives and their own careers. So when I look around me, I see all these political issues, the hypocrites and greed and everything else, and it makes me sad, especially when I look and think about the relationships I've had with people from China, from America, from Africa, from all parts of Europe. 99% of people are genuine people who want to do something in their life, they want to make something of their life, they want to make things better for people around them. And so when I think about my hopes for the next 10 years, I hope that this common sense of people sharing each other's knowledge, sharing each other's cultures to the benefit of everybody, I hope that comes through. And similarly, this world has finite resources, and I realise that really we are taking more of the resource than we're putting back into it. And so again, a hope I really do have is that we find a way of nurturing science, nurturing nature, to make it more beneficial, to make life on this earth better, longer for everybody. And back to the race in space. Now we're talking about going to all sorts of planets. Who knows what is there? Surely there's going to be something exciting for us somehow. And I don't know how that's going to be, but my hope is for coming together, using each other's ability and knowledge.
So my name's Solange Bignell, and I live in Hove, just outside Brighton, in the UK. And what future did I imagine for myself when I was a student? I was a student of languages, and I loved languages. I was doing French and Spanish, a bit of Italian, ancient Greek, anything I could get my hands on. And I wanted to be an air hostess. I wanted to be one of those trolley dollies and fly all over the place. Yeah, that was it. And I had friends who were in computer science, and I thought it was so dull, so dull. I really didn't want to do that. And so here I am in technology. So that didn't work out very well. I didn't manage to get air hostess. I thought about teaching, and I got a place on a teaching course, but I couldn't take it up. I was going to teach languages. So I tried all ways to be in languages, and I've ended up in technology. And I'm really, really happy. So where do I see myself, what my future is now? I think just doing my job but better. I actually really, really enjoy it. So apart from retiring in a couple of years maybe, I'm looking forward to just doing what I do but better. I'm working with people and computers at the same time.
So, what were my expectations of the future when I was a student? So I was a student in the early 80s, studied technology, microprocessor design, and back then that was very exciting times. Technology was really accelerating. We were beginning to see the beginnings of the personal computer. Mobile phones weren't quite there yet, but we had real fabulous inventions like VHS recording for television. We'd been to the moon. The whole world was pretty buoyant. And I guess from a technology perspective, then I was excited that technology would change the world, would create more opportunities, would create more wealth, would create more jobs, and generally enhance our living. At that time, we predicted the outsourcing of manual labour, moving up the value chain for jobs, creating more wealth, better employment through education. So there was a whole anticipation of better education, better standard of living, and generally just a better way of life. At that time, we were in the UK, we were joining the EU and the common market at that time. So the promise of experimenting with different lifestyles, mixing with different cultures, having the opportunity to travel abroad in a much more relaxed, easier, open border was a huge positive. So yeah, things were looking very good back in these days, and I think buoyant would be the word I would use to describe the potential for the future back in these days. Thank you. So fast forward to 2019, 40 years from when I was a student. What are my expectations now of the next 40 years of the future? A lot of predictions from back in the early days didn't really materialise. Things went astray. Potential for better jobs and education wasn't really fulfilled over these last 40 years. The cost of education was never met, never supported. We failed, I think, in terms of creating a new culture, a new lifestyle generally. I think looking forward now for the next 40 years, it's going to be really interesting in that the promise of some of these technologies that we mentioned earlier will come, will mature. The communications, the mobile phones, the internet, and the societal changes that it brings will be the areas of interest, I would say, for the next 40 years. Certainly, how does open systems and and the internet itself change culture. I think we'll need to look forward to a world of very different rules in terms of privacy and security, big challenges. I don't think we're going to see the onset of atomic war and global destruction, but I think we will see the rise of cybercrime in its place. In fact, we're beginning to see the beginnings of it already. So I would look forward to a lot more political based cyber intelligence kind of crime, and a world where it's going to be very important to protect your identity and look after your security. The stress on countries to support their own people, given mass migration, will be a huge issue, and I really believe that we'll start to see borders close down in the next 20 years, 20, 40 years, and nationalism probably come back into fashion again. So, let's see what happens.
How did I imagine my future when I was young? I don't recall having elaborate dreams about the future when I was young. I remember having a dream about having a family, a wife, kids, a house, all of us living together in an environment where my extended family were around. Imagined having a nice car, but I don't recall any specific brand of cars. Imagine living in a world where we were safe, and I imagine the kids would be well educated and they would continue to stay within the family unit. I think that's what I imagined when I was young, my future to be like. I don't think it was elaborate, but it was one of a happy household, and that's what I expected my future to be like when I was young. How do I imagine my future now I'm a little bit older? I see not much changing really. I still see family in my life. My wife standing by me, us spending a lot of time together in our retirement, traveling the world, walking the world, seeing some wonderful places on earth, spending a lot of time with our kids and hopefully grandkids, our extended family. So my future, for me, it's all about me spending time with my wife and my family. That's how I see my future.
Hi. Well, I think when I was a student in the 1980s and 1990s, I was really optimistic. I think I imagined a world and a country that would get progressively more prosperous, and also living standards will also continuously improve. I also imagined technology would actually bring people together more. I think I also imagined travel getting a lot cheaper. And really, I think I had this sense that I was more of a global citizen. So rather than being a citizen of just one country, I really believed that the future held global citizenship for me, and the world would be much, much closer together. I even imagined, for example, not just a European currency, but a global currency. People were talking about that in the 1980s. There could be one global currency for the whole world. For me, that was a fantastic idea. For me personally, I imagined a career path that was going to be relatively easy to progress in. I also expected a very good final salary pension when I retired. I didn't see myself having a poor retirement. And I also imagined going up the housing ladder quite easily as well. I thought I'd just simply buy a house or a flat and keep getting bigger and bigger houses and flats over time. And I thought that would be quite an easy thing to do. I also imagined a world that would be more ecologically and environmentally aware. I just imagined that environmental standards would continue to improve constantly. For example, I imagine that by now all cars would be electric. On top of that, I also imagined that space tourism would be a reality. So I really believed that we would be visiting space stations in orbit and maybe even moon colonies, bearing in mind that this wasn't so long after the first moon landing as well. Lastly, I think I imagined a world where most diseases and cancer were all cured by now. And again, on top of that, I also believe that world poverty and hunger would have ended. Remember, things like Live Aid were hugely inspirational, so I really believed the whole world was coming together and was going to solve the world's problems. So as for the future today, I have to say I feel a lot more pessimistic. We've been through a serious global financial crisis. The future economy seems so much more uncertain even now. There are right-wing governments around the whole world that are doing two things, I think. One, letting environmental standards slip, and also creating an increased rise in nationalism. I find that very uncomfortable. Personally, I think the worst examples of that are Trump and Brexit. But I even find things like Scottish independence very, very uncomfortable. I think that's such a shame. I also feel less optimistic for the next generation. I feel that millennials have to study longer. It's harder for them to get well-paid jobs, and it's much harder for them to get on the housing ladder. So for first-time buyers on the housing market, it's extremely difficult. House prices have increased much more than the wages have, for example. For me personally, I no longer have a final salary pension, so contributions to my pension have to be much higher in order for me to have any kind of decent pension when I retire. As far as treatments for things like diseases and cancers are concerned, I think we have made huge technological advances in medicine, but we have come to realise also through things like the Human Genome Project, which mapped all of the human genes, that both the human body and diseases are much more complicated than we ever imagined. So unfortunately, I think the cures for many diseases and cancer are still quite some way off. One area I do feel more optimistic about, though, is about getting married. So personally, being gay, I never imagined that was even a possibility for me. And now I know it's a very real possibility for me. So that's great. So overall, I do believe society has moved on and certain things are better, but I can't help feeling a degree of pessimism, especially for the next generation.
So the answer to the question of how I imagined the future when I was young, when I was growing up, there was a lot of space, 1999, Buck Rogers and the 25th Century, Star Wars. So to me it was very futuristic. So I imagined the future, we'd all be wearing silver, flying around, having the little Star Trek intercom systems. So that's how I imagine the future. I thought it'd be very futuristic with lots of computers. I never thought of mobile phones, but I thought there'd be lots of communication systems and big computers with big clunky buttons, because I grew up with the Superman phase. So that's how I imagine the future to be. So how would I imagine the future now? Well, I hope it's going to be more medicine related to help people in their old age with diseases and things like that. And to me, I imagine there'll be lots more telecommunication, lots more videos, a lot more sci-fi, a lot of technology to help us. I don't know how much further we can go, but maybe we might have robots in our house, sweeping the floor. So a lot of manual labour might be replaced by robots, but I'm hoping there will be research to help old people in their old age, and the technology to help us sustain a good level of life. Thank you.
Now, the future that I imagined for myself as a student, wow, I was going to change the world. I was going to go off and teach hundreds of children how to live and be happy, and it was a very carefree, we can solve all of the world's problems kind of plan. We were capable of anything back then, and we thought we would go on and achieve all those things and not have any responsibility or day-to-day accountability. The future now is much more full of the day-to-day responsibility and the accountability, and a recognition that in hindsight we have solved a lot of those things. We didn't all just jump on planes and go to Africa like we thought we would, but we've done it in different ways, through leveraging technology, through fundraising, and more importantly, I think, through raising our families to be loving, caring and considerate and more open than we probably were back in the day. So now my future is definitely surrounded by children. I hope my children will go on to have children, and I'll be a very proud grandmother somewhere, carrying on, giving them wise learnings. I hope we will continue to leverage technology as we do to improve the world that we live in, and I hope that we are learning through our practices to be more kind and more caring. I see the change. I see that tide is very much happening now, and long may it continue, that we become a much more peaceful planet that we can save and preserve for the next generation and the generations beyond.
So the question is, how did I imagine the future when I was young, which seems a long time ago now? To be honest, I didn't really think that far ahead when I was at school. By nature, I'm impulsive and not really much of a planner. I've never really been academic. I was always middle of the class. I got by at school, but I had no real desire to go to university. I was always anxious to get a full-time job. I've been working since I was 12, doing various different kind of part-time jobs. But I was really keen to buy my first car, which in the end turned out to be a Ford Escort Mark II, which was my pride and joy. I didn't really know what work I wanted to do. My dad thought that banking would be a good kind of civilized career to have, and that probably explains why I had 5 jobs between the ages of 18 and 23, although I did finally settle down and spend 20 years working for a major bank. I'm a born romantic, so marriage, kids, my own house were always high on the wish list, but I never really sat out to have the highest paid job, the biggest house, the flashiest car. But I'm lucky that I did get the best wife though. Although that's what she tells me to say, and she's holding the camera. I didn't really think about technology because I grew up at a time before the World Wide Web and smartphone and flat screen TVs, so didn't really know what the world had in store for us. Thank you. So the next question is, how do I imagine the future today? And that's a very interesting question given all the controversy surrounding the Brexit. So for fear of alienating half the people watching, I'm going to play it safe and avoid politics today. Personally, I see a lot of travel in my future. After working 70-hour weeks for the last 7 years, it's time for me to take a time out and to go and travel the world with my beautiful wife and with friends and family. The world's a place full of culture and history, and sadly, even though I've travelled extensively with my job, it's been all work and no play, so I've not really had the time to enjoy it. I see a future that's full of health, happiness and hopefully lower blood pressure, so I'll be taking a lot more care of myself. Thank you.
I'm studying physics in my first year at university, and this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time now, and really happy that it's finally happening. It's going very well. I can hope that the next 2 years or so of studying keep going that way before I then have to try and think about what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Now, I've got a few options. At this moment, I'm really enjoying science and academics, so I could definitely see myself pursuing further study, maybe in a different country to try and gain some experience living abroad as well, learn some languages. But I'd be up for trying new other things as well. So one thing that I've got in my head, big dream of mine, would be to go into space. And I think being an astronaut and seeing the world from outside is one of the most humbling experiences that one can have. Now, in terms of the general future of the world and humanity, I think there are lots of issues that people are very aware of. But for me, something that I think is really gonna can't think of an alternative, not take off, shall we say, pardon the pun, is space exploration. Over the next 50 years or so, there are big plans to travel to Mars, to travel to the moon, and I think advances in technology and changing people's attitudes is something that will see this happen. Other things I think are really important are definitely the rise of artificial intelligence and machine technology. This is something that I think could have incredible applications, but if dealt with badly could go wrong as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jinal. I'm from the UK, and the question was, what do we think the future is going to be like? I think I'm quite an optimistic person, and I hope that the future is going to be like happiness and like sun shining and like birds chirping and animals are all okay and everything like that. I see us using a lot of like green energy as a planet to kind of help heal the world and be more responsible with how we treat the like Earth. I see us using a lot more space tech as well, so like going into space and exploring it, because that's going to be like the biggest thing since we've basically covered the planet at this point. And yeah, I also see society in general as being a lot more open and accepting and integrated, because as we kind of evolve in what technologies and communications we use, I see the planet kind of getting smaller per se, and people integrating their cultures and everything as we grow, like as we get further. And yeah, that's how I see the future when I grow up, even though I'm an adult already.
Hi, my name is Pablo. I'm in my first year of economics. And right now my vision for the future is that I'd like to do something with development economics or environmental economics. I think I'll finish my 3-year course, maybe stay on for a master's or a PhD, and then work for an institution, hopefully, maybe something like the EU or the United Nations, something that allows me to travel with work would be great. I think beyond that, I want to do something sort of meaningful that excites me. I think that's the main thing. And then beyond that, I'd like to maybe settle down, have a family, and just generally live a happy life. More generally, in terms of the future as a whole, I think climate change is the biggest issue right now. I think if we don't act and change the way we behave as a whole human race, then there might not be a future for us to see. So I think that is the main sort of thing that I see for the future. But beyond that, I think technology has a scope to go really, really far. I think with developments in AI, maybe even quantum computing, we'll be able to solve all kinds of problems that we haven't been able to solve before, like the millennium problems. I think we can eradicate many diseases. I think we could really better ourselves as, globally, we could really better ourselves. But I think without the focus on climate change, then, technology is going to go nowhere, because there'll be no planet for us to live on. So leave it there, yeah, that's fine.